And we are live. Good morning, good morning, good morning, everyone. We have our great friend Alex with us again, and we have
Thank you.
another great friend. Hang on a second. And we have another great friend with us today, a very special guest, Jerry, and he's got a channel called Jerry's Take on China, and recently came across it, and I just found it fascinating. He's got a lot of stories to tell, and all-around great guy. He's got a lot of knowledge about geopolitics and around the world, and especially about China. And I decided to invite him to have a great conversation with us, and it's a pleasure to have you aboard, Jerry. Welcome to the
Thank you very
channel.
much. Thank you. And it's great to see you. And it's great to see Alex again. We met in July, I think it was, in Chongqing,
Yeah.
maybe August.
Time is flying. Great to
Yeah,
see you
half a
again,
year.
Jerry. And
Yeah.
hi to everyone. It's interesting tonight that I'm actually the guest tonight. Normally I'm on the other side, but AJ says, you know what? I want to have you guys on the screen tonight. And I said, okay, AJ, you're the host. You do it. Let's see what happens. Thanks,
Yeah,
AJ.
it's good. We thought we'd try and change things up a bit. Today I'll be trying to do something different with the channel, ask a few questions. We're gonna have a different sort of show today. We're gonna call it three different takes on China based on Jerry's name of his channel, because his channel is called Jerry's Take on China. So we're going to have three different perspectives. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask some questions. I'm going to throw some questions around, and I'm going to get Jerry and you, Alex, to basically answer them, and with your own take, obviously. And I've got my questions in front of me, and before I start, I just want to say hello to all the moderators. Thanks for joining, guys. I'm just going to check who's there. We got Anom here as well. We got Zuge. Yeah, thanks, guys. Appreciate it. And everyone else, don't forget to like and share. Let's push this for the algorithm. Really appreciate it. So the questions I have for today. Actually, what I'm going to start with, I've got this major story, just breaking news yesterday. Basically, what happened was Qatar signed a major gas deal, and we're talking about 60 billion LNG deal. This was signed for a long-term deal for around 50 years or something, and it was a huge deal. And the reason it was a huge deal because the Europeans and the Americans have been pestering Qatar to give them this LNG for years now. And you've seen, um, Habeck going into Qatar. You've seen Boris even going into Qatar. You've seen Biden going into Qatar and literally begging them for LNG and oil. And yesterday, there was a big announcement that they have given this contract to China, and the Europeans are absolutely shocked, and the world is shocked, and we have to ask ourselves why. Why has this happened? And I mean, I've got one answer to this, and you just have to look at the news, and it's all related, guys. Everything in the world is related, and the World Cup is is all about the World Cup because you've seen the news. It's all about human rights in Qatar, how Qatar is not following human rights, and this is because Qatar has not been giving them oil or gas contracts, and they decided to pick on Qatar for various reasons, and. And beginning of the World Cup, all I could hear is human rights this, human rights that, nothing about football. And I think Qatar just said, you know what, screw this. We're just gonna, sell this contract to China. Screw the West. I mean, what's your take on it, guys? I'll start with Jerry, then I'll go into Alex.
I think that's a really interesting question. It was a 27-year deal to sell 4 million tons of gas per year for 27 years. It's the longest deal in history. Until a few weeks ago, actually it was less than a year ago, it was about this time last year, November, early December, America signed a deal with China to do pretty much the same thing, but it was a 25-year deal. And I think it was a slightly less. It was 3 million tons or something like that. Obviously, they're fulfilling the needs that China has of getting gas, which is cleaner energy than coal. What they have done, and both of these countries have done something which has really hurt my home country, Australia, because Australia was exporting gas into China. But you're right, absolutely right, AJ. It has been nothing but human rights problems, worries, issues, all the different problems related to Qatar until this deal was done, which obviously people knew that this deal was coming. It wasn't public knowledge, but people in the industry would have known very well that this was coming. But I see another little issue here, which is no one's talking about this one, and see if this is ringing any bells with yourself or any of your audience. There aren't enough ships to do this. So right now, the pipeline from Russia into Europe, part of it's broken and part of it's not functioning, and it's all sanctioned anyway. So the idea was that America would ship across the gas from America into Europe. They've also got contracts to ship gas to China. Now, a lot of that gas was being transshipped, never coming to China. It was being sold on paper. So it was shipping in America on the ships straight to Europe, and all the paperwork went through China and it was sold to Europe without the gas ever arriving here in China. Now, there aren't enough ships in order to provide both countries with their need, or both regions with their need, European Union and China with their needs. So the other thing is, I think that China is probably going to find itself in a position where it builds more ships. What that then does is put China into a virtual monopoly. They currently own something like 35% of all the containers in the world, 20% of all of the container ships in the world, and they will then own, once this is done, all of the gas ships that are not owned by Greek shipping companies in the world. So I think that's probably an underlying factor that remains to be seen. It will give China some form of monopoly on transportation of gas, if not a monopoly, a duopoly with probably the Greeks, and a triopoly, with, if that's such a word, with the Americans, the Greeks, and the Chinese. So we're kind of entering into a George Orwell, 3 different regions. We've got the Oceania, we've got the Eurasia, and the Asia. So interesting to see where it goes from there. But yeah, I think there's a lot of nastiness going on about Qatar. When a country doesn't give America and the West what it really wants, then suddenly that country becomes a pariah in terms of human rights. We've seen it for the last 5 years with China, very much so. So that's my take.
Yeah, and this reminds me of the Beijing Olympics. And as soon as the Olympics started, you've seen all of these stories about human rights, and you've seen all these countries, Western countries, decided to boycott China. And Putin actually turned up, and he signed a lot of deals with China at the time. I believe he signed a gas deal. He also signed many other great economic deals. And then a few months later, the West, the same West that boycotted China's Olympics, were asking China for a favor. Oh, do you mind sanctioning Russia, please, for us? Would you mind doing that? I mean, why the hell would the West, ask for these favors when they literally embarrass China by boycotting the Olympics? And when you boycott another country's Olympics, that is like the worst insult you can give to a country. And there is no way that China would, sanction Russia. Who Putin actually at least he turned up. Watched the Olympics, and built up a lot of relationships and built up a lot of good rapport with China. And then the West, who have boycotted China, asking for favors after that, it's just beggars belief. And with Qatar, I mean, you cannot talk about human rights when you ignore what's happening around the world, when you ignore what's happening in Palestine, when you ignore what's happening in Yemen, for example, when you ignore what's happening in Syria, you ignore what's happening in Afghanistan. You cannot talk about human rights until you basically put all of these countries in the same way. I mean, they pick and choose where they want to use their human rights, and they use human rights as a weapon. I'm not here to support Qatar, and probably some of the stories are right, but what I don't support is when the West basically picks and choose which country to pick on when it comes to human rights. And signing the gas deal one day after the World Cup started is not a coincidence with China. I think that was a big finger up to the West, saying, you know what, you've completely embarrassed our country. This is what we're going to do. We're going to sign this deal with China. And this happened a day after the World Cup started. And a lot of countries actually boycotted the opening ceremony. In UK here, we didn't see the opening ceremony. It was boycotted by most of the channels, including the BBC. So it was kind of like a boycott. And I just think the West has completely shot itself in its foot now. What do you think, Alex? What do you think about all of this stuff that's happening?
Well, let's just think back here a little bit. Let's go back to 2017 when there was quite a diplomatic crisis in Qatar. They had the Saudis angry. They had the UAE angry. They had pretty much everybody in the Middle East as well. Bahrain, Egypt. Qatar was in a very difficult position back then, and I think they're in a difficult position now. They're looking for allies, and what the best way to get an ally on side is to give them something that they need. Let's also fast forward from that diplomatic crisis to 2021 and 2022, where China did have a big liquid natural gas deal with Russia that they actually put on hold. This has been on hold ever since March of this year. So I think what China does is they shop around. They look for the biggest cat. They find them. If they can get a deal done with them, they line it up. They put their money where their mouth is. No problem there. They can sign the checks, fast forward the money to them, and even pre-approve for it to get a nice discount. What's happened here is the geopolitical landscape has drastically changed, where you have Russia, who's pretty much the top dog in liquid natural gas. Of course, the Americans got lots, but as Jerry has also explained to the audience, that logistically doesn't make sense. Trucking that stuff halfway around the globe, and you need special containers and ships to do that. So what China has done is they signed the dotted line with Qatar. Now, let's think about who else is in that region. Well, the Saudis are there, okay, and they are good allies to the Americans. And after that, then Qatar. Now, it could be the timing is interesting that they signed it. I mean, it could be a deflection. To me, I think it's a straightforward deal, but it's a deal that could, as we have discussed here, 27 years, it's a lifetime. But I'm wondering at what price they're selling this, at what forward future price they're selling this. Because when you enter a deal like this, or if you're forecasting and you're an owner of a, PetroChina or some of the big ones, Shell Oil, they're buying on futures, and these future prices can get locked down. Give you an example, guys. 4 or 5 years, they were giving away natural gas 4 or 5 years ago. Now it's at a premium. Okay, what is China paying for the next increments? 3 years, 5 years, 7 years? They have already calculated what they're paying. So the Qataris could potentially be signing the deal here, risking, if there's a spike in natural gas prices, they're not going to be able to enjoy that. So it is quite a serious deal. I think when you have 27 years, that's like, it's almost like the mortgage companies. When you're going to buy a house, you want to lock in that fee. Now, China's been probably pretty clever on this. They probably really hard negotiators, and they probably advance Qatar some money, because the Qataris in the Middle East right now, you got to just look back at 2017. Their planes were not allowed to go anywhere. They weren't allowed to land anywhere for the longest time, and they pretty much squeezed the Qataris out of oblivion, but they managed to get an agreement. That's my take on this.
Exactly, Alex. And a lot of people probably have forgotten that there's a deal happening, which Jerry mentioned, with United States. And this deal started during the Trump era, when Trump put some sanctions on China at the time, and there was a trade war going on. And they signed a deal. I can't remember the name of the deal now, but and as part of that deal, it was up to China to sign this LNG deal from United States, and they had to buy a certain amount of LNG per year. And this was a long-term deal, and this was a fixed contract. And that was then during the Trump era. And at the time, LNG prices were very cheap. fast forward to today, and China is making a huge profit from that deal. Absolutely huge profit, because it was fixed price, and because it was something that they signed for a long term. I can't remember the exact term, how long it is. And it looks like the Chinese are winning, and they are reselling that LNG to Europe with a huge profit. And they're doing the same thing. And also they have replaced that uh, they have replaced that American LNG from Australian LNG, I believe, because
Yeah.
Australian LNG was the biggest. Um, they were buying from Australia as part of when trade relations were fine and everything was fine between the two countries. But since Scott Morrison came into power, I think obviously the relations soured quite a lot, and I think LNG was was one of the main things that Australia had suffered, because what they did, what China did, they cancelled the um, LNG contract with Australia and signed a deal with the Americans. And first of all, this is how your friends treat you, and this is exactly what America's doing to Europe. They are destroying Europe's economy, industry, and in the meantime, they are signing deals with the Chinese instead. And this is exactly what they've done. So, what do you think about all of this, Jerry? How would you
Yeah,
put it?
it's the same degree of hypocrisy when which you mentioned before. When America wants somebody to be sanctioned, they come along and say sanction these people. They want China to be sanctioned about all kinds of different products. One of the things, obviously, we've got tomatoes, we've got cotton, we've got solar panels, we've got all kinds of different sanctions going on in America from America to China. Then, of course, when it suits them to do business, they're quite happy to do business, and that's not a bad business that they're doing. They did do a big deal. It was in November last year, and it wasn't the Trump era. It was the Biden era, but it was the biggest deal in natural gas history, one of the biggest deal in fuel histories actually, and it did cost Australia a lot. Now, the other thing about Australia that most people are not aware of is that trade between Australia and China has never decreased. There have been down months, but overall trade between the two countries has never, ever decreased. What has happened is there was a problem with coal, there was a problem with barley, there was a problem with lobsters, and there was a problem with wine. Now, those problems are all itemized, and China has told the world what the problems are, but Australia are telling the world that this is China bullying them. It's not actually true. Iron ore and coal still coming across to China in big amounts. Wine is still coming across. I can buy wine in the local supermarket that's from Australia. There's no problem with that. So a lot of the stuff that we're reading is not the stuff that's really happening. And I think that's what a lot of people forget. But one thing that, just getting back to your original question, it's not about who's got the gas and who hasn't got the gas. It's about the hypocrisy of America will have these standards that apply to them when they are in command of something, and they will expect everybody else to apply the standards when they haven't got command of something, and they want to regain control. And that's the hypocrisy of it. You mentioned human rights, and you went through lots of different countries: Palestine, Yemen, Syria. All of these different countries, they all have human rights problems, but one of the worst is actually the United States. And the United
Yeah.
Nations Human Rights Council can't get
Yep.
in to have a look, because the last time they tried, they were stopped at the airport, detained, turned around, and sent out of the country. So that tells you the hypocrisy is real. It's very, very real hypocrisy there.
Of course. I mean, you can just talk about the abortion issues that they're having. You can talk about Black Lives Matter. You can talk about the huge incarceration rate in the United States. And people forget that a few days ago, somebody walked into a gay bar and started shooting innocent gay people who were just having a party and having a good time. And I think 5 or 6 people had died. And people forget about stories like this. If this happened in Qatar or anywhere else in the world, that would be front page news and say, "Oh my God, look what's happened!" And they just pick and choose wherever they
If,
want.
if it had happened in China 20 years ago, they'd still be talking about it today.
Yeah, exactly. So Alex, I mean, how do you think this will affect Europe? Because obviously China has signed this major deal with the Qataris, and Europe has been literally begging Qatar for this gas deal for a couple of years now, since obviously the Ukraine crisis. And how do you think Europe will react? And do you think they will survive at all? Because their options are going down day by day. I mean, what do you think will happen?
Well, we have to remember the pipeline structure in Europe and the Soviet Union, what they did during that time. I mean, there is a colossal amount of pipes coming from Russia into the Ukraine, not just the two big ones that were taken out recently. There is many pipelines, and a lot of them then go down near the Greece and Turkey. Now, something I want to tell you guys is that Europe's going to be fine. The governments are going to be able to get the natural gas in there. They're going to be able to get the oil. They're going to be able to get all the fuel that they need. The only issue is the prices that they're getting them at is the real issue. And that's going to be passed on to the average guy. Sorry to say it, if you live in Germany, if you live in France, if you live in Spain, you're going to be paying more money. I remember that old saying when they said to me when I was young, you know what, son, the mistakes that the government makes, you're going to be paying for them when you get older. And I thought, what are they talking about? And that has come true for the younger generation of Europe. It is dark times, unfortunately, here for the next maybe decade or two, unless some of these elected people put on their geopolitical and their diplomatic hats at the same time, sit down at a table, get this organized, get to an agreement, all guns down, and everybody can then move forward. Until then, skyrocketing prices, places and businesses go to the wall, they go under. Will the lights stay on? Probably. Are they going to be damn expensive? Absolutely. Hotel owners in trouble. Bar, pub owners, anyone in the service industry that has to accommodate electricity, gas to making foods for the kitchens, stuff like that. That is going to go through the roof. And there's where the knock-on effect happens. It's inflation. Then it's high lending rates. Get this. When people need cheaper mortgage rates at the number one time where they need mortgage rates to be as low, it's now. The problem is now the Fed is fighting it the other way. They're clocking higher. Give you guys one example. When you have a guy that has been in around the world, I've seen a lot of things here, and I think Jerry can attest to that. That if you're in a country that has a fixed program, for example, if somebody wants to take out a mortgage in Canada, maybe 30 years ago in the UK, it used to be 10, 15-year mortgage rate, okay? Now that's went to 20, then to 25, now to 30. Now they're talking about the 40-year fixed. That's the next ball to drop. So that means university student finishes university, buys a house, and that is the house that they pay for the next 40 years. And when you're starting to get mortgage rates up against 7, 8, 9%, that house pays for itself 3 times over in interest rates before you're even hitting the principal. So this is a pretty serious time here. Yes, people are not going to go cold, but boy, oh boy, heating is now a luxury.
Jerry, you have anything to add on to that?
Well, I agree. I absolutely agree. I think heating is a luxury, and it's really getting to a point now, talking to people in the UK, little less so in Australia. It did shoot up a while ago. Fresh vegetables shot up in Australia, but they've stabilized now, and they're back down to, they're a little more expensive than they were. Nothing ever comes back to what it once was. But it's going to be, for a lot of people, a choice of, do I heat my house or do I have my lunch? And it's as simple as that. When you start now, the problem, and Alex, living in China, would know this. When you have an electricity supply or a gas supply into your home in China, you don't have a standard fee for that. There's no standing charge. In the UK, I believe now it's £10 a day standing charge. So even if you don't heat, you've still got to pay £300 a month or more for your electricity supply, just to have the privilege of not using your electricity supply. Here we use what we pay for. And I think that's probably the big thing. Even if you don't heat yourself, you're still paying the price. And that's a huge problem for any organization or any country that doesn't have its utilities that has privatized its utilities. They need to keep control of their utilities, in my opinion, and that's what China has done. If it belongs to the people, it stays belonging to the people. The government manages it, of course, but it belongs to the people, and they don't put the price up for you, or they don't put the price up to unmanageable levels to make profits. It's not about corporate profits; it's about staying alive. And the mortgage rate's exactly the same. Mortgage rates have to go up because they will bring inflation down eventually. I remember a period of time when in Australia many years ago, my mortgage rate went up to 13, 14%. This is credit card interest rates for buying a house, just to live in a house. So, yeah, it can't be sustained, but it's going to have to happen.
I mean, I live in UK and I can tell you firsthand how bad things are here. I mean, my mortgage rates have gone almost double since last year. My gas bills have tripled since last year. And I go out in the streets, and I made a video about this a few days ago. Things like margarine, butter, pasta, everything's gone up by 40 or 50%. Groceries, and the government says obviously the inflation's gone up 11%, but I just think it's a lie, because if everything has gone up more than 50% or more than 100%, or things have gone triple what they were last year, then it's not 11%. It's much more than that. And obviously the government's not going to release the true figures, because that would cause mass panic, mass riots and things like that.
Yeah, if you take food and fuel away from your calculation, then your inflation rate probably is 10%. If you put food and fuel back into that calculation, it's probably 40, 50%. I don't know the exact figures, but yeah, you take away the major costs that most people have, their home, which is their interest rate or high rents, and their fuel and their food. Those are things that you can't do without. And those are the things that they're taking out of the equation to say your inflation's only gone up by 10%. Well, yeah, it might have, but my living costs have gone up by 30, 40, 50%.
Yeah.
I think also, AJ, the double whammy that I think the Brits are missing here in this whole equation is you haven't seen the Brexit tax yet coming in, and you haven't seen the Brexit
right. Yeah,
that is gonna whop you like you've never seen before. When you cut off a logistical line there, and we're talking, the feeder to the UK, and I'm not saying for everything, but let's just say for everything that maybe you enjoyed, that nice French wine, that great Italian sausage, all those wonderful things, those easy packages moving along. Now you have British parents waking up saying to their sons, hey, remember, we made this to make the country better. And the son or daughter might say, but mom, that doesn't make sense. I could have been able to live and work without ease, without any problems in 27, 28 other European Union countries. Now I can work in one. What happened? Was it worth it? Was it really worth it? Is it worth it to be alone as a country in this chaos? You got Brexit, you got COVID, and now you got one hell of a geopolitical issue. So what do? They throw money at it. I'm waiting, guys. I'm just waiting for just one leader of a European Union country to say, you know what? Enough is enough, to break rank and say, open up Brussels. We got to get this diplomatic channel over. We got to invite the diplomats from Russia. Let's sit down at a table, because we are destroying our credibility and everything what potentially the European Union stood for. And this is it. I mean, it's all for nothing for this one. I mean, they are about to risk putting a lot of countries to the wall here. I know that Bulgaria, a small little country, not too many people might not pay attention to it. They're hurting big time. The Hungarians, they've had enough. The Greeks, they're tired of this. I mean, their shipping is getting involved in this geopolitical race. These other countries, the Baltics, I mean, they were long gone ago. And so what's it going to take for all these countries to go into a massive recession, anarchy in the streets? Yeah, that sounds familiar. It just might happen.
Of course, yeah. And Jerry, you mentioned oil companies in Britain, and I think last 3 months or last quarter, BP and Shell have made a whopping 81 billion in average in terms of profit. And these companies have made 200, 300 billion over the past few years, taking advantage of the high oil prices and gas prices as well. And like I said, these are going into the pockets of shareholders. These are going into the pockets of the executives. None of it's coming back to the ordinary citizen. You see countries like France who have nationalized energy, and the people have not been hit by high energy costs like UK has.
Not
And
so much.
yeah, but however, it's an easy fix. All you have to do is nationalize these energy companies while in the times of hardship, for example, like now. And imagine 80, 90 billion going into your budget as profit, and you can share that amongst everyone. And people, won't have to starve. People won't have to freeze. However, they will never do that because these oil companies, these bankers have a lot of say in how the government policies work, and they have too much power. And it's the same way the military-industrial complex in the United States has too much power. I think they've just gone too big for their boots. The government will never ever target them or get money out of them, and that's a big problem. They rather squeeze the ordinary citizens. And you're right, Alex. I mean, this Brexit tax is coming on top of all these issues people are having in UK. They're increasing the taxes as well, and do you remember the promise that Liz Truss made when Liz Truss was here? She promised that energy prices would be capped; they would not go up. And I said during our live stream, I said, I guarantee you by April it's going to start going up again, and it did. They're going to start, increasing these price caps, and I just don't see how far British people are going to survive. And I was walking around yesterday, and I met up with some friends. We went to the local pub, etc. And everyone's into their football, the World Cup. Everyone's talking about human rights in Qatar. I'm thinking, hang on, hang on a second. Have you seen what's happening in your own country, and you're focused about human rights in Qatar? Have you ever thought, like, if you're able to feed your children, or have you ever thought about keeping your children warm over the next few months? And you're here, you are thinking about Qatar, and I'm just, oh my God. I think British people are completely oblivious to what's happening around here. How's it like in Australia, Jerry? And I'm also going to ask Alex about Canada as well. So I'll start with you, Jerry. What do you think about how
It's a little
Australians are
hard.
feeling?
It's a little hard to say because I haven't been there since 2019.
Okay.
We're just over. We left there in November 2019, so 3 years ago was the last time I was there. My understanding, I mean, obviously I've got family and friends over there as well. My understanding is not as bad as Europe. It's certainly not that way. The funny thing is, it's exactly what you say. They're very concerned about global and geopolitical affairs, and they're not really looking outside the window to see what's going on there. There's a very strong fear. No, that's probably not right. There is a fear with some people that is very strong that China is going to invade Australia at some undetermined time in the future. And I've actually had that said to me, but what about China's preparations for war against Australia? What? That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And hopefully the mood has changed a little bit, and hopefully the swing is coming round. We've seen that we have Penny Wong as the foreign minister, and we have Anthony Albanese as the relatively new prime minister. And he's been on the hustings. He's been to everywhere. They did COP, they did ASEAN, they did G20, they did the APEC, and now he's going home and he's got to sell this to his public. Now, he has a good public to sell it to. He's still in his first year, so they're fairly relaxed about what can go wrong. He's a billion times better than his predecessor, and I think pretty much everyone except the predecessor's die-hard followers would believe that. He's a better choice for Australia. So I think the optimism in Australia is greater than the optimism or the pessimism in Europe has to be. So I think Australia overall is seeing things in a better way. And as I said, their trade with China has been dented and scratched, but there's no fundamental damage to the vehicle. The vehicle is still perfectly running very, very well with a couple of little scratches on it. The people who sell wine will say that's wrong. The people who sell beef will say that's wrong. But the people who sell iron ore and coal and oil, bauxite, those kinds of minerals and resources that Australia sells lots of to China, will be rubbing their hands. They're very happy at the moment. Australian business with China is still in the black. It's still very positive. 40% of their exports, 40%, 42% actually, of everything that leaves Australia comes into China. They can't afford to upset China. So I think the mood now is going to be one of a little more optimism and positivity. I certainly hope so, because in all honesty, if over the next, and we'll know in a month, what happened after APEC, after G20, after ASEAN meetings, will reflect in the next month in the political scene in Australia. We'll know whether or not this has worked, and I think most people are fairly positive that it will. That will upset the Americans, but so what?
Sure. Before I go into Canada, I've got a question about Australia, really. And everybody knows that the current Prime Minister for Australia is much better than Scott Morrison, Albanese, obviously, I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And every time Scott Morrison used to open his mouth, used to be some sort of rhetoric about China or some anti-China rhetoric. And it was just obviously playing up for the camera. The relations got so bad that China stopped all diplomatic channels with Australia during the Scott Morrison years. But however, do you think that the Chinese will ever get that trust back? Because the AUKUS, the submarine deal, is still going ahead. Obviously, Australians have kicked out Huawei, kicked out a lot of Chinese investments. They are obviously causing trouble with the Solomon Islands as well. So these issues are still outstanding. They're still going ahead, and these are major, major issues. And do you think Albanese has got any sort of power to reverse that or to do anything? Because I think those are the main concerns China has. What's your thoughts?
I think Albanese is in a very different position to what Scott Morrison was in. First of all, he has the control of the House. He has the support of his own party. Scott Morrison didn't have the support of his own party. He didn't have control over the House. He was sharing control as a coalition, and that's the fundamental difference in terms of the power structure, but also in terms of public relations, in terms of what really goes on. Albanese does not have the support and has never had the support of the press in Australia. The press is very much controlled, very much a large percent of the press is controlled by one man. He's no longer an Australian, he's an American citizen, and he took over pretty much every local media, every local news stream that you can think of. And he has several TV stations. Most of the city media are his, lots of radio stations as well. And that's Rupert Murdoch. Now, Rupert Murdoch has never been favorable towards Albanese. So people don't believe what they read about him anymore. And I think that's probably the major factor, that people are very, very wise now. And I think the major factors that were really stopping things from happening were that press and the instability. And the instability has gone now. He's going to have to prove in the next 2 years, because the electoral system is only a 2.5-year system. He's going to have to prove over this next 2.5 years that he has done a deal with China and the deal is beneficial, rather than threatening or in any way benefits China more than it benefits Australia. It will be mutually beneficial. So he's got 2.5 years to do it. He's got a press that never supported him anyway, and he's got a parliamentary system that does support him and a parliamentary party that backs him so far. So I think I would feel more optimistic about the way Australia will go in the coming months. We'll see if I'm right. If I'm wrong, of course, it's gone the other way, and it will be a disaster for Australia, because they'll get their iron ore from Brazil, they'll get their bauxite and coal from Indonesia. There's lots of things that China can do that will hurt Australia, but I don't think China wants to. I think China's quite happy with sharing it around. That's my view.
Sure. Going on to Canada now, Alex, and do you think there's any sorts of relations warming between China and Canada? And everybody's seen this viral pic that's going around where President Xi was literally scolding Justin Trudeau in front of the world camera. And do you think there's any hope between China and Canada relations at all?
I think so.
happening?
Vancouver has just elected its first Chinese mayor,
All right.
and
Wow.
that is a pretty good triumph, if you ask me. But to be honest, on the political stage and when it comes to economies, Canada is pretty irrelevant, if you ask me. I mean, they're a country of 37 million people. The issue is that they just haven't invested in their infrastructure. We still have a single rail track going coast to coast, 8,000 kilometers, that has to bring cargo from the east to west, from the west to east, but on one rail line. So you have, they have to sit on the side while another train goes through. They're switching tracks all the time. This shows you a country that is not ready and is not willing to grow up and get into, the big boys club. Canada can do that if they put their money in the right, investments, but they've made mistakes. And we've got countries that are, preaching to countries like China. Let me give you an example, guys. China is a developing country, but all the other countries that are giving advice to China are acting like a developed country and treating China like it is developed. You only have to look at the what China has done for the last 3 years here in its COVID prevention. I mean, besides New Zealand, it's one of the only countries that has really used big data, cared for humans. And I think, I'm going to say this, and I don't want my Canadians to take this the wrong way, but when you're born and raised in Canada, yes, of course, you love your mother and father and your brothers and sisters. But then there's this individuality that comes out of you when you get into college. You're an individual. China's different. From what I've experienced here, just being here under a couple of years, is the people here, when there's an issue here. I'm in Chongqing right now. We're in a very serious lockdown, okay? A very serious one. 517,000 local people are volunteering to keep this city going, we'll call it behind the scenes. And it's a spirit. I can't explain it because I haven't had that in my own country. Sure, we might all gather around and help if there's a forest fires or a catastrophe. But look what happened to us in 2020. Our governments failed. Every major, Western or the collective West governments have failed. They failed to keep people alive. The numbers are there. They're not lying. 1 million dead in the United States, 800 million infected. You don't do that to people that you care about. You don't do that to people that you love. You don't do that to your country that, you love and care. And that is something that I think the rest of the world doesn't understand about China. It's a big country, 1.5 billion people, but it's the way this country has moved forward. And it's a hard thing to explain. Really it is, but I've seen it a lot here in the last couple of weeks here on, the way they communicate in the middle of a crisis. We're in a crisis here. There's no denying it. It's a big city. Imagine grinding to the halt a city of 32 million people and then immediately trying to logistically take care of everyone. Well, they've done it. And did we do it in Canada? I mean, Chongqing's almost the population of Canada. They did it here. What happened to my country in COVID? Why didn't they call up the military to help? Why didn't they bring in this extra person out? Why didn't they call every firefighter out there to get out there to help the vaccination drive? Oh, well, we'll try to vaccinate the population over the next 4 months. What are you talking about, guys? Stop everything. Get your military that you pay millions of dollars or billions of dollars a year. Mobilize it. Get everybody ready to go. All hands on deck. Did it happen? Nope. Never happened. And they're still paying the price. They're fooling themselves if they think it's over too. So,
Thanks for that, Alex. Let's move on to the G20 while we were talking about Trudeau. And the G20 seems like a long way away. But when I was watching the BBC at one point, and I was watching it live, and I was working and seeing all of these live headlines come on, and it was like watching a circus of some sort. And you would see stories. Obviously, I'm talking about the Poland incident, and every 2 minutes or so, I would see some news flashes saying, "Oh, the British Prime Minister is now talking to the Polish Prime Minister. British Prime Minister is now talking to NATO. Biden is now talking to NATO. Biden is now talking to Polish Minister. Biden is now talking to Zelensky. Zelensky is now talking to the G7. G7 is now talking to NATO." Every 5 minutes, I used to get these headlines coming up, and it was a circus for at least a whole day. It was like a circus, and media was saying, "Oh, Article 5 is going to get triggered," and they were in the G20, and the insult of these G7 members having their own separate meeting away from the G20, and the amount of time they must have wasted just running around like headless chickens, calling each other up, calling the Polish Prime Minister, calling NATO, calling Zelensky. When they were at the G20, they have any work to do as part of the G20. And then you see this image coming out. Then you see this image coming out all over the press about the G7 members having a meeting, and none of the other G20 members were there. And I just thought it's such an insult to the host, Indonesia, and an insult to the other G20 members. And then you see these obviously these viral images of Rishi Sunak and Justin Trudeau running around, drinking together, going to pubs, wearing matching T-shirts, and I'm thinking, oh, what the hell is going on here? It's like a circus. And then Rishi Sunak gets snubbed by President Xi. Obviously, he didn't like what Rishi Sunak had to say about China. And he was obviously the only prime minister who got snubbed in the G20 by President Xi. And all the other prime ministers or presidents meeting President Xi, all these Westerners, were just using that opportunity to talk about human rights, to talk about. It's just giving them an opportunity to look good in front of the press, and also to look good in front of Biden, obviously. So yeah, I met President Xi and I told him about human rights and blah blah blah, and it just seemed like an absolute circus to me. And my question now is the G20 going to be absolutely irrelevant now? I mean, President Xi has seen firsthand what these G7 members are like, how he got treated. Is he just going to say, you know what, forget this G20 thing and just focus on BRICS and SCO? What's your thoughts about what's happened, Jerry? And I'll go into Alex after that.
I didn't get half of what you said there on my news feed. I mean, it's really entertaining to listen to this. I didn't know about the matching T-shirts. I didn't know about the drinking together. I honestly didn't even know that Rishi Sunak had been snubbed by Xi Jinping. There's a lot of stuff that I'm not getting here. And it's not because it's not available to me. I've got a VPN. I just stay well clear of CNN, BBC, all the crap news because of what you just said. This is not news, it's entertainment. And it becomes so irritating. What the fuck are you doing? You've got a world to run. We're in crisis. We've got 1.5 degrees almost guaranteed in the next few years. We're not going to achieve targets. We're not going to do anything we said we were going to do. The world has got a debt crisis. It's got an interest rate crisis. It's got a gas shortage crisis. It's got all these crises going on, and they're wearing the same T-shirt. Oh, God. So, as far as I'm concerned, Xi Jinping just got on with his business. He got on with business. He met the right people. And you're absolutely right. It's going to be SCO, the Shanghai Cooperation Agreement or Cooperative Agreement. It's going to be RCEP, which Australia is in, New Zealand is in, China is in. It's going to be BRICS, and it's going to be Belt and Road, or One Belt, One Road, as the Chinese call it. We've called it in English Belt and Road Initiative. So it's going to be those things now. And I wouldn't be at all surprised if next year if Xi Jinping says, I don't have time for the G20. It was a bit of a waste of time. Why don't I just stay home and you come and visit me when you want to? And those people, there they are. Look, I haven't seen that. Thank you for showing me that.
And the funny thing is, this is them talking to Zelensky. I don't know if you can
yeah, it's muted. It's
Can
okay.
you not hear it? No. Oh, sorry.
No,
That's a shame.
okay.
But I think I'll have to save it to my desktop and share it. But it's on Twitter. If you get a chance to watch it.
Mobile phones out and having a chat with Zelensky.
And then this clip is basically Rishi landing in the G20. The first thing he does, it goes to a pub and starts drinking with Trudeau. And this clip is going around viral. And it is an absolute, it's like a circus. And look at the way Rishi is looking at Trudeau. in this picture. And it was an absolute circus between these. I mean, this clip was gold. It's basically them talking to Zelensky, and he was just so cringy, guys. It was absolute cringe fest. But
Does
yeah,
Zelensky
carry
speak
on.
English? I don't know. I've never seen him or
Yeah,
heard
he
him.
does.
Yes,
Yeah.
it does. Yeah.
He does, okay. It's because there was no translator there. Okay, no, I had no idea on that, and I do believe you're absolutely right. There's so many. I'm actually in the process of making a series of videos, and I did ASEAN. Sorry, I did APEC and G20. I'm doing a videos called abbreviations and acronyms, and SCO, BRICS, BRI, OBOR. All of these different things are going to be explained over this series of videos over the coming couple of weeks. The big thing for me now, of what I'm seeing here, living in the Greater Bay Area. So Alex and I are both in China, but we're a long, long way apart. But living in the Greater Bay Area here, we've got the RCEP is huge, the Regional Cooperative Economic Partnership. It's fantastic. Yeah. It's basically a free trade agreement between this area. Australia, New Zealand are in it, Thailand, Cambodia. Fresh fruit, vegetables, all these kinds of things are just crossing the borders now, and it's taking 1 hour to get them across the border and into the marketplace 4 hours later. It's really good. So we're seeing things like durian is very popular here. I don't personally like it, but it's hugely popular. And Thai durian is coming across the border. It's the locals tell me it's delicious, and it's really much cheaper than it used to be. And this all because there's a free trade agreement and lots of ease of restrictions. Bringing in fruit used to be more difficult. It's not anymore. So, yeah, things like that, they're going to be much more important than G7s, G20s. I mean, if the G7 really was G7, there'd be a few different countries in it. India would certainly be in it. It's got nothing at all to do with the top economies. The G20 is not the top economies. They're all made up from the top 33 economies, but it's not the top 20.
Exactly.
So, yeah, it's not that important a feature. And if they're not going to achieve anything from doing it, we're still waiting. Last year, the G7 came away with a policy of Build Back a Better World, BBB3.
It's Build Back Bankrupt.
Yes.
Nothing has happened. So what was the purpose of that? This year, they're still talking about it. They walked away from COP with an agreement that we're going to have this massive, great big fund, but nobody knows how it's going to be managed, who's going to manage it, where the money is coming from, and how the money is going to be dispersed. So it's going to be the same as BBB3. Nothing will happen. It's just words on a paper, and it's headline making. And I hope, China knows this. Xi Jinping probably knows this, and he's going to walk away and say, I have got better things to do than waste my time there.
Alex,
sure.
What I found most funny out of the G20 is, obviously these missiles hit Poland and killed a couple of farmers, and you see the thing is, there was so many people running around like headless chickens. All the British papers had already printed their paper ready for the next morning. So the next morning, all you see was the headings of, World War III, NATO will start Article 5. However, the night before, Biden already said that these missiles did not come from Russia. They're actually Ukrainian. Mm-hmm. And so all of these papers in the British papers, all printed this story about World War III and how these missiles came from Russia. And Biden already debunked it the day before, and NATO debunked it in the morning. And so we were going around the whole day looking at all of these papers. The British people were looking at all of these papers, thinking that there's going to be World War III, there's going to be NATO's going to kick off Article 5, start war with Russia. And it was absolutely it was just funny to watch. And I was watching people, and I was meeting people on the way to work, and people like running around thinking, oh my God, there's going to be war, I'm thinking, no, calm down. And first of all, why would Russia fire a missile at a couple of farmers, kill these farmers, and start Article 5? Just doesn't make any sense. If Russia wanted to attack Poland, they would hit some NATO bases and things like that. Why would they attack a couple of farmers and say, come on then, let's see what you got? What do you make of this, Alex? It seems like an absolute circus to me.
Well, I want to go back to what we were just chatting about, I just wanted to say something about, the G20, the G7. I mean, these are kind of like, if you're a collector of, we'll call it hotel cards or loyalty cards, okay? You have these in your wallet here if you're a politician of a country. Okay, I got the G7 card and I got the G20 card, but the BRICS card now, the BRICS card, 26% of the world's oil, 40% of the world's corn. I think it's 46% of the world's wheat. What, 3.2 billion people in that? That's the card that you want. And I think Xi has been briefed enough to understand that who he's sitting down with, who he's doing business with. He gave Trudeau a scolding. He deserved it. And, but when it comes to this kind of stuff about, news flow, they printed the papers because they're shameless. They're really shameless. Maybe that was an editor saying, oh man, do we really want to pull the front page? That's going to cost a lot of money for ink. They're shameless. I mean, the true reporters, some of them are actually YouTube content creators that are out there. There's many of them. Some of them we know personally. Patrick Lancaster, who's been doing it since 2014. He's got one of the best archived video footages of that region that could potentially be used in a tribunal in the next future, in the next few years, if this gets into that deep of an investigation. What's going on there? I do want to say, AJ, I got something going on in the building here. Okay. I'm gonna have to. We got some weird, not in my apartment, but I'm pretty certain the smoke alarms are going to be going off here. Either that somebody's burning garbage out front of the building or in the building. But I'm almost certain I'm going to have to leave here in a few minutes.
Sure,
but
no problem. We'll carry on.
I'm going to stick around. But another thing I want to mention is that we have, as Jerry was saying, talking about the COP27. I mean, it's gone from trillions to now billions to now maybe millions of investment. It's gone the opposite way. The momentum's gone. And everyone's looking at China saying, well, where's China's contribution?
Yeah.
My, oh my.
They want China to pay for it now.
Well, internally here, domestically here, there's a lot of money being spent on green. It's a lot. You don't have to go far. I mean, I just take a drive out of the city here and there's windmills floating around, solar panels going around, trees being built all over the place. Everybody's driving e-cars everywhere. The sky is blue, everybody, in Chongqing, China. The sky is blue. That should be the litmus test right there. Go back and look at what this city was 30 years ago. You couldn't see the sky. I mean, one of the ladies in my office who is born and raised in Chongqing told me that she didn't see the blue sky until she left Chongqing. I think it was to go to university or to visit a friend out of town. And not until recently, they put their money where their mouth is. I do want to say, before you guys go on to your next segment, I would really like to join again and have this roundtable chat with you guys again. And I appreciate your efforts, AJ. I know that getting Jerry on the show is a very, very smart move. And Jerry, I have to tell you, I'm really starting to like all the content you're making for YouTube now. When we sat at that table a few months ago, I met Jerry for the first time, and I tell you, he has a lot of knowledge on what's going on in China. This guy has been all over this country. And of course, AJ, we hope to get you here in China as well. But gentlemen, once again, please keep up the work that you guys are doing. And AJ, if you can have me on again, it's kind of interesting being on your show. This is cool. This is cool.
We can do it again next week if Jerry is free.
That would be great.
Like
that would be tremendous.
If you're happy with that,
but
Jerry?
I just want to say special thanks to some of my viewers here. I'll leave the feed on the iChongqing channel. If you guys don't know about us, we're media reporting out of Chongqing, China here, one of the biggest cities in the world. And my name is Alex. And of course, you guys know me from Reporterfy. But thanks once again. Thanks to Hang, thanks to Suntan and Ben and all you guys. It's been a great pleasure to share the screen with you. AJ, be careful because you will be able to chat with Jerry for hours, okay?
Yeah, I know.
He's a fantastic guy.
Yeah,
Jerry,
I've got
if we
so
could sit and
many.
have beers together, it'd be great.
Yeah,
I have
definitely.
another live stream at 10:30 at 9:30, so we have another hour. That's all.
Okay,
Popular guy.
we'll try and finish up another half an hour or so.
Sure.
Anyway,
Sure, that's good.
great pleasure, guys. But I smell some wood burning here, so I have no idea what's going on.
Thanks for coming, Alex. I really
luck,
appreciate it. We've got around 500 viewers, so really appreciate everyone who's joined in. Please like and share, subscribe. You know what to do. But thanks for Alex for your time, and we'll
Thank
see
you,
next
AJ.
week.
Message me after the show, okay? And
Yeah,
I'll let
sure.
you know what's going on here. Okay,
All
take
right, no
care, guys. Thank you,
Take care.
Jerry. Bye.
Good luck. Thank you.
Bye.
So
And then there were two.
let's move on to COP27, and
Yeah.
so I'm reading this article about how these Western countries now are saying that they want China to pay for it all because China is the biggest polluter and blah blah blah, but they're not taking into account the historical basically emissions. So countries like USA, UK have got historical emissions going all the way back to the 1800s, for example, and
The Industrial Revolution.
yeah, and they have been polluting the world for decades now, and now they want China to basically pay for most of it. And what people don't understand is China is the factory of the world. So only reason that all of these Western countries do not have much pollution as much pollution as China is because they have outsourced all of their factory work to China. So all of the manufacturing, all of the factory work is done in China, and they buy it very cheap because obviously costs are cheap in China, energy is very cheap, labor is cheap, and so that's what they don't.
You've muted your microphone.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I was just about to start answering your question in case you came back. So, yeah.
What I was trying to say is obviously they're not taking into account the historical stuff. They're not taking into account the fact that China is the factory of the world. So most of the world has exported their pollution to China. And thirdly, what a lot of people don't realize that United States military industrial complex actually produces half of the pollution in the world, and they do not add all the military pollution into all of these stats, because I think what
they excluded military from when they went into the Paris Agreement. I think they excluded military from national stats.
Yeah, that's right.
The US is the largest polluter in the world by
exactly.
I don't know those numbers, but it's considerable amount.
But consider, and per capita, US is the largest per capita, and a lot of people don't seem to take into all of these factors into account. I mean, what's your thoughts about all of this?
Yeah, it's interesting that two of the cleanest countries in the world, which we consider to be the cleanest countries in the world, Canada, and Alex would bear me out on this, Canada and Australia, because they're such large countries with very, very small populations. But they're in the top 5 in terms of the per capita emissions. So they're not doing the right thing there. Now, the thing is, as many Australians have pointed out to me, it doesn't matter if Australia cut to 0 emissions tomorrow, it wouldn't affect the world. There's that little of it. But per capita, it's still bad. So Australia's not the big problem. Canada are not the big problem. It's the big nations. It's the nations with the larger populations, and they are America, China, Russia, and a few others. Indonesia is another one. And those populations are creating the problem. But what you say is absolutely correct. And it's not a recent problem that's causing global warming, if that's what you want to call it, climate change, if that's what you want to call it. And I'm no great scientist on this. I don't really know what's right and what's wrong, but I know that it's a good idea to clean our air. And if we clean our air, we need to consider who made it dirty. And yes, it wasn't China. It was the rest of the world until 40 years ago when China took over. And you're right, they exported all their toxicity, they exported all of their manufacturing, and then they imported it back as finished products, and then they throw it away when they don't need it. So it really isn't China's fault. Although China is the largest contributor to this, I don't think there's anyone going to argue about that. China is contributing to much more than just the pollution. It's contributing to the solution of the pollution, as Alex pointed out. I've cycled past wind farms that took 2 days to ride past. And, we're riding 20 kilometers an hour through this wind farm, and it's literally taking 2 days to ride through there. I've cycled past solar panel farms, which take several hours. These are so big that they're at the side of the road and you cycle for hours and it's only solar panels. I've seen deserts in 2014 turned into apple orchards in 2019. Things like this are happening all over China. And little things that we don't hear about, whales, rare breed of whale, the Bryce whale, was found in Shenzhen Bay last year. A leopard was found in a Shenzhen park this year. These are animals that don't come back unless the nature is there for them. There are literally millions of migratory birds going through Guangdong province every year, stopping for several weeks or several days, and then moving on to wherever it is that they're finally going to. They're traveling through different times of the year. We've got spring and autumn where these animals, these birds migrate through. We've got massive, massive wetland areas which are dedicated purely for keeping the environment pristine. And that's happening in Guangdong, the engine of manufacturing throughout the world. And a lot of people don't realize this. I've actually made a couple of videos about it earlier on, but I do want to go out traveling more. COVID's preventing me to get out. I've actually only been on YouTube for 6 months, and COVID has prevented me for the last 6 months from really doing what I want to do, which was get out and show this kind of China. I do believe that China has done more than any other country to reduce its impact on global climate problems. Already done that. And as Alex said, skies are blue. The skies are blue almost every day. Of course, we get rainy days and cloudy days, but we don't get polluted days anymore. I haven't seen one in probably 8 years. That's the way it is in China.
Excellent. So I was going to go back to that story you mentioned about ASEAN. And one of my questions was, recently, China had met with Vietnam on a summit, and loads of economic deals were agreed. And one of the major economic deals they agreed with Vietnam was to build high-speed rail links linking China into Vietnam and going through Vietnam. And this is a huge deal, which not many people understand, because there's already a high-speed rail link going to Laos, and and that's going to be extended into Thailand. And there's also, during the G20, Indonesia opened their own Chinese high-speed rail link, which goes throughout the Java Island and what have you not. And they recently opened it. And I believe the leader of Indonesia actually showed a lot of these Western leaders the high-speed rail link. And took him on first class, and he was absolutely amazing. I think a lot of them were shocked by it all. And now Vietnam has signed this deal, and it's a huge deal. I think the only stick in the mud is Malaysia. Malaysia's the only one that's actually been messing around over the past few years due to the change of government and probably a lot of kind of pro-US influence as well. But if Malaysia eventually gets its act together, that Thailand rail link will eventually get into Malaysia, will eventually get into Singapore, and there could be a tunnel going from Singapore into Indonesia, and that would link up literally nearly all of ASEAN in the next 10, 20 years or so. I mean, this is all obviously...
I actually have a theory. I read an article about 3 years ago. In fact, it was my father-in-law put me onto this. He said to me, about 3 or 4 years ago when we're having dinner, my father-in-law only speaks Cantonese and my Cantonese is crap. but he was talking about Australia, and my wife was translating for me, and he actually said they're going to build a bridge to Australia, and I just laughed. I said, "You crazy? You know where Australia is? You've seen it on a map." He's a very smart guy. He does know where Australia is, and it's almost exactly what you say. If they build this link to Malaysia, then there's no difference going from Malaysia into Indonesia. It's not that difficult to do.
No,
They can
no.
go via Singapore, or they can go through different parts of Indonesia. There's plenty of islands there. And then what they've shown they can do with the island hopping that they've done from Hong Kong to Zhuhai, and I'm not sure if many people realize how far that is. Hong Kong and Macau are about 80 kilometers apart, and they've built a bridge straight across the mouth of the river from one to the other and into the mainland. So I can literally, from where I am on the other side of the Pearl River, I can literally be in Hong Kong in about maybe an hour and a half. From getting off a plane to walking through my front door takes about 90 minutes. Hong Kong to Zhongshan. Now, Zhongshan is not near Hong Kong in any strait. It takes 90 minutes by ferry to get just on the ferry, just the boat, 90 minutes to get to the island. Not the island, to Kowloon. And it's a long way. So they've proven that they can build 80-kilometer bridges. They're building another one, which I think is 67. It's a combination of bridge and tunnel from here to Shenzhen, Zhongshan, where I live, across to Shenzhen. And that shows they can do this. Now, of course, we're talking about much greater distances, but if you think about where Indonesia is and how it ends up going in through Papua New Guinea and into the Gulf of Carpentaria and across, it's not inconceivable that maybe not in my lifetime, but sometime in the next 100 years, there'll be a train line from Beijing to Sydney. I wouldn't be surprised.
Of course.
But it's not going to work if we're all working for the same team and pulling together. But yeah, it's not an immediate thing, but definitely there are plans to do this. They're not plans, they're ideas, they're strategies that have yet to be implemented.
Sure.
But China does things very long term. You mentioned that Malaysia's got problems with its change of government. Now, China doesn't really have that. It does have changes, and it has different factions, and it does have a form of democracy that a lot of people don't agree with, but it works. It works very, very well for about 1.3 billion of the 1.4 billion people here. They're quite happy with what they've got and don't see any need to change it. So I can see very, very long-term strategies, and that train into Vietnam is one of them. The extension of the Laos into Thailand is another. I'll be jumping on a train at my local station and going to Bangkok in a few years' time if I want.
Yeah, of course. I think you just have to look at what's happening in Laos in terms of its economy. That train line has literally doubled the Laos economy in a year. What they made a few years ago is now doubled this year. And trade.
It's interesting because it's not so glamorous. It gets forgotten about. But there's actually a slow train as well that runs across there. So there's freight trains running from. Not Guangzhou, Guangzhou, Nansha. There's an intermodal port in Nansha which takes freight trains all the way across to Poland, Germany, Russia, of course, and Mongolia. And it's moving. I think it's moved over 500 trains this year. So it's better than 1 or 2 trains a day going out of these places. And these trains have got 70 or 100 containers on them, and off they go to the other side of the world.
That's
and it's happening in Asia and in Europe. It's already happening. So this is the real Belt and Road, which people don't get to see or don't get to understand.
Yeah, and obviously this is all part of the RCEP, which is mainly the Asia, America, which includes Australia, not America. It's called Asia Pacific, which includes Australia as well. And they are building their supply lines, and eventually you will see these train lines obviously going into Cambodia as well. And these are Chinese. And these are Chinese trains, and also these are what you call European tracks. European tracks are what's used in China and what's used in Europe as well. And so they do not have to change these tracks. So this means that these trains can go all the way from Vietnam into China without changing tracks. The only track that's different is in Russia. and Russia
Russia
have
to
their
Ukraine
yeah
border, I think,
yeah. I
and
think
that's
Russia.
a throwback to the end of the war when they thought they might need that train to stop there.
That's right, because of they
Cold
didn't
War,
want German trains to going into Russia and stuff, so they completely
something like
changed
that.
their
Yeah,
track. But
I
there
saw
is a
that.
new technology now where Chinese trains stop at the border, and there's an automated technology which changes the wheels. I believe it goes from European style into Russian style, and this is done automatically, and it takes about 30 minutes or so, and that will basically be a huge difference to between Russian
Mm.
and Chinese trade when this goes live. And that means trains previously you had to manually do it, and that would take probably days. We're talking about, and we're not talking about
Mm.
hours here, we're talking about days of manual labor work, which is really, really difficult. Now if it's done automated, you can go directly into Russia and go straight into Moscow and then go to Europe from there. So it
Well,
opens a
it can
huge
already do this. It can already do this. It just can't go into, I guess, NATO Europe. It can
yeah.
already go. It goes across to Poland already, which I know is NATO. This train leaves Guangzhou and stops in Poland already. So I'm not sure how that works. Maybe there are tracks that are slightly different, but
Mm.
definitely there's trains going from Guangzhou from several different places on the east coast all the way across into what we call Eastern Europe, Poland and the Balkans.
Sure, and I did kind of touch this the fact that Laos has really benefited from this
Yeah,
line, and
yeah,
the local people are benefiting, businesses are benefiting because there's more trade with China, and also China is also building loads of factories as well in Laos because obviously it's cheaper, land is cheaper, the costs are cheaper, and that helps bring down inflation and also helps bring up Laos as a
yeah.
country as well. So if the
They're
country
doing
gets,
that in Cambodia too. There's quite a
yeah,
few Chinese factories moved down. I actually know a factory owner who's moved from this city, and he's moved his entire factory down there. He's still got an office and a design center here, but it's 20 people. He had 20,000 people once. Now it's
that's
20 people, and the rest are in Cambodia. So
that's
that's
right.
certainly helped the Cambodian business for sure.
Yeah,
That's been very good for Cambodia when
yeah,
someone does that.
and it's a win-win, Jerry, because when you think about Vietnam, Vietnam used to be a very poor country 20 years ago. Vietnam was very, very poor. And then Chinese started building their factories in Vietnam, and they started, trading between the two countries. And slowly over time, Vietnam started becoming richer, richer, richer.
Yeah,
And now Vietnam is actually a very, very rich country now. And because it's gone richer, now we can afford high-speed rail lines to China. You can build on the infrastructure, and it's a win-win across the nation. It's a win-win
yeah,
across different countries, and you can see how Vietnam is benefiting. And now, because Vietnam has become much more richer, China is now benefiting because you can trade more with Vietnam. You can build all of these infrastructure projects with
yeah.
Vietnam. It's a win-win
The
across
way
the
I
whole
view it,
area.
I don't know how much you know about poverty alleviation program. I view what China is doing with underdeveloped or less developed countries around the world as an extrapolation of the poverty alleviation program. And I think what we should do is probably, rather than get into that now, is pencil that in for the next time we talk.
Sure,
Let's
sure.
talk poverty alleviation because it's a huge and very, very long topic if we get started on it. And as
Exactly.
Alex says, once you start me, I won't stop.
That's fine.
So,
So we're going to go to back to the Middle East now, and
yeah. Okay.
we'll talk about this and maybe one other topic. See how the time
Okay.
persists. And I wanted to go back to Middle East because President Xi is going to Saudi Arabia. I believe it's probably next week or some point.
Yeah, I heard that. Yeah.
Yeah, and obviously there's going to be some major deals which is going to be agreed between Saudi Arabia and China, and most of these deals are going to be about trade. Some of it is going to be about infrastructure, and as you know, Saudi Arabia is going through a huge infrastructure program. They're building Neom, the line, Oxagon, many projects happening in Saudi Arabia, costing about 7 trillion. So
Wow.
they will need Chinese investment, Chinese help for that. Trade, that's a big thing. But one of the other major things which everyone is talking about is the ability for Saudi Arabia to sell its oil in yuan, which is going to be a huge game changer for not just China but for the world, because this would mean that China does not need to hold as many dollars in its central bank to buy oil from Saudi Arabia anymore. You can buy in yuan, which means you'll
Mhm.
make the yuan stronger and you'll make the dollar weaker. And the petrodollar, if Saudi Arabia starts selling oil in petrodollar, the petrodollar could die within 10 years. And this is a huge worry for United States. And obviously, then they're not going to sit there and take it. They're not going to allow this to happen. What do you think the likelihood would happen if Saudi Arabia agrees to this with China? And I believe Saudi would want some sort of security guarantees from China to say, look,
Yeah.
if we agree to this, you guys will have to protect us from United States, because they're going to start doing color revolutions. They're going to start doing regime change stuff. So we'll need protection. And it's going to be a very difficult thing for Saudi to do, because a lot of people don't realize that there's about 30 or 40,000 US troops already stationed in Saudi Arabia. And it's very they do not need to even invade all of Saudi Arabia. They can just take control of the oil fields like they've done to Syria. They can just take oil out of the country and take all ways of Saudi Arabia making money, and they could easily do that. They don't need to invade Mecca or Medina, what a lot of people are saying. And
Mm.
they can just take control of the oil fields. They've got the troops there. They've got all of the weapons stationed there. So it would be quite an easy thing to do. So this is where Russia and China comes in. Do you think Russia and China would agree to some sort of security guarantee, maybe even uh, promise, like same way Russia has protected Syria, for example?
Mutual
Uh,
defense pact of
yeah,
some sort.
yeah, something like. What's your thought about all of this? Because I think this is going to be a major game changer in world politics if this goes ahead,
Yeah.
or if this is agreed. It's going to be
Well, we're immediately going to start seeing. We're going to start seeing more about the human rights abuses in
yeah,
Saudi Arabia. That's the next thing. I mean, it goes back to what you said before, or what we said before. If we don't agree with America, then obviously you're a country that has human rights abuses. That's how it'll pan out. Will it pan out into a global conflict? It could. It very well could. What do I think is, gosh, I don't want to predict this one, because I honestly don't think America can allow it to happen. It's as
no,
simple as that, because
yeah,
the moment oil stops being the benchmark for the dollar, then that's when the dollar becomes virtually valueless. It's only
yeah,
got value to its own customers. And of course, people will want to keep the value of the dollar up, because most people are invested in it. Even China holds $1
mm,
trillion of US debt.
yeah,
And that would be written off. So I think China has got to be very. It's a game that they're going to have to play. It's a tightrope balancing act, and how they do it. Honestly, I don't know, but I agree there needs to be some sort of security pact. But that security pact needs to be such that it's written in such a way that it doesn't mean going to war. Ambiguity, strategic
mm,
ambiguity, like we had with Taiwan, a security pact, but it doesn't mean we're going to go to war to help you. And I think that's probably the thing that needs to be done. I mean, in all honesty, China could, if it wanted to, destroy America next month. It could. It doesn't want to. Why would it want to? It would destroy its own economy in doing
mm,
so. It
yeah,
literally just has to say, well, we're not going to export any medicines to you next month. And America would grind to a halt and civil war within days. Once medicines start getting hoarded and saved for the rich people who can afford it, because 80% or 90% of all medicine in America is coming from China. That's all that needs to happen. China could close America down, but it would destroy everything. And why would
mm,
China do that? There's no benefit to doing that. So currently, I think it has to be balanced, and I can't think that it would be what you're suggesting. A mutually assured defense pact would become a mutually assured destruction pact for certain.
yeah, and you're 100% right. And I just do not think America will stand for it, because you have all of these
No.
dollars floating around the world. I mean, because of the petrodollar, America has been having the license to print as many dollars as they can without suffering from a huge inflation themselves.
Correct.
And they
Yeah.
have been spreading out inflation throughout the world because of the high cost of the dollar and petrodollar. So countries are forced to not only keep petrodollar or dollars in their central bank to buy necessary goods like oil, gas,
Yeah.
other commodities. But so this increases circulation of the dollar throughout the world. And imagine if this they lose petrodollar status. This means that the countries do not need to hold the dollar anymore. They can buy oil in other currencies like the yuan or their own
Did you
currency.
see did you see the deal that China did with Iraq last year? They're building 10,000 schools. And I think the payment for those
Yeah,
10,000 schools was not dollars and it wasn't money. It was 40 ships full of oil or
yeah,
something
yeah.
like
That's
that.
right. Yeah,
And that may be what China can do to avoid. China needs to solidify its
mm,
supplies of resources, its supply of power. It has plenty of coal. It has plenty of water at the moment. It has plenty of solar, but it still doesn't have enough of what it needs. So it's bringing
no,
in gas, it's bringing in oil, it's bringing in coal, and it has nuclear power, but it doesn't have enough yet. So what it's doing is consolidating its position, and it needs to have guarantees of that kind of power. But what it can do is it can provide Saudi Arabia with what Saudi Arabia needs without the exchange of money. So if Xi Jinping goes to, well, when he goes to Saudi Arabia and when he does deals, I have a feeling it won't be deals for money. It won't be deals for ERMB or RMB yuan. It will be deals for infrastructure. Saudi Arabia might need a
yeah,
train station, a
yeah,
train line that runs to Medina, or something like that. And yeah, that's how it should pan out, I think.
yeah,
And
yeah.
then everybody can keep their face, and nobody needs to start rattling their sabers.
Yeah, you're 100% right. Because there's
Mm.
$7 trillion worth of infrastructure projects in Saudi ready to go, and I believe China will probably step in and say, "All right, we'll do this for you, but it'll
Yeah,
cost you this
yeah.
much of oil and stuff." They have the same
And,
deal
and
with
then
Iran as well.
and then they'll have to do a deal with the Philippines because half the workers come from there.
That's right. That's right.
Mm.
Yeah. You're 100% right. I completely agree with you. I think that's what's gonna happen. And you're right. I mean, if they do go out of the petrodollar and they do, I'm just talking about the worst case scenario, and they did agree to sell it in yuan and other currencies, then all of these dollars floating around the world would be dumped by countries, and all of these dollars will end up back in the US. And there's going to be hyperinflation because we're talking about hundreds of trillions here going back into
Yeah.
the US, and all of these you'd see the bond yields going shooting up. You'll see the dollar um, literally start falling, and there'll be
Mhm.
hyperinflation, and it would cause absolute mayhem. This is why US will not stand by and allow this to happen. And you're
Mhm.
100% right. I think the smart solution would be for China to build infrastructure in Saudi for oil, and they're doing it with Iran. They're
Yeah.
building
They're
infrastructure
doing
in
it with
Iran
Iraq. I don't
and
think they're
Iraq
doing
as
it with
well.
Iran.
Oh, with Iraq, yeah, yeah.
Mm. Yeah, it
But
was
yeah,
Iraq. Yeah.
100% right. Um, we got a few minutes left actually,
Okay.
and I
Yeah.
think
One last
we'll
topic.
yeah, we'll probably stop it now because I think if we start talking about another subject, we could go on. But I think I want to kind of leave it to 1.5 hours. I think that's a good time.
Okay,
Kind
I've
of
been watching your comments here. I've noticed that when I comment, it says that I am you. It doesn't say that I am me. So
Oh,
how
really?
that happens?
Okay, that's
Yeah,
that's
I don't
fine.
know. Yeah, it's hi Arama. Several of my followers are there, and Arama has just turned up. So yeah, I've seen some of your some of the things that the comments coming through on here, and they're really good comments. You've got some very good followers here, or
Yeah,
good moderators, I think.
yeah,
Normally, when I'm on a live stream like this, you see all the not all, you see some idiots coming through, and this is really great. I'm looking at these and seeing, wow, positive comments coming through, informative comments coming through
yeah.
as well.
No,
I
no,
like
you're
it.
right. I'm really lucky to have a very good following in terms of
Mm.
subscribers and stuff. I've been very lucky. I don't think I've got one. How would you say idiot out there? I think everybody is very intelligent. Everyone's clued up, and I'm very lucky to kind of read their comments, and I actually learn a lot from them as well. It's not just me reading stuff. I learn a lot from
Yeah,
them.
me too. I
And
learn a lot.
yeah, and it's a community end of the day. We help each other.
Yeah.
I
And it
you
is
know,
troll free here. Yeah.
yeah,
You're
yeah,
right.
exactly. I think that's what you want. You want to sit down. You want to talk intelligently. You want to interact with people. You want to
Mm.
throw stuff